All right, now it's time to continue working on our project and start doing our player movement and some other basic mechanics. And before we go into our actual coding part, I want to explain you few things how they work and how those mechanics can be done because I don't like going directly into the coding because you might be completely new to Unity and programming in general, or maybe you are a beginner and it will be harder for you to understand if we just go directly and code some lines. And yeah, I don't want that. I want you to actually understand what and why exactly we are doing it. Okay, if we select the player, we will see that it has these three arrows because we are in the three-dimensional game, 3D game, right? Okay, and those arrows have different colors. A Unity blue arrow, so this arrow is considered to be our Z direction, orange is considered to be X, and green is considered to be Y. And if we, for example, select player, and if you check the Z position, when I move my player forward and backward, as you see, my Z direction is Z axis is changing. So it means that the z-axis, so z arrow, blue arrow, is considered to be our forward direction. So forward and backward direction. Now, this orange arrow, as I see when we change this orange arrow, X is changing. So it means that it's for the left and right movement. And well, green is for the Y direction, and we will talk about Y when we will do jumping. But for now, in order to make our player move, it means that we should change position of our player on the Z to move forward and on the X to move left and right. All right. There is few ways how we can handle our player movement. And one of the ways, and one of the most common ways, is to add some player controller into character controller, sorry, into our game object, into our player, which will help us to move. A character controller is built-in package in Unity, it's standard package. So to add that package, we just need to select player. Let's scroll down in the inspector on the right side. Here we will see this add component. Let's hit it. And in the search box, we can type character controller, just like this. Now, this character controller already has the collider inside. So what we can do, we can uncheck capsule collider because we don't need to have this capsule collider anymore. And we will talk about colliders very shortly. But for now, we have the character controller applied to our player perfectly. And with the help of character controller, we will be able to move because this character controller has built-in method, which is called move. And I will show you when we go in the coding part. But next thing that you should know is that Unity has some input manager to access what inputs we are getting from the player. For example, we have inputs of our keys on our keyboard, we have inputs for the mouse, and so on. And if we go in Edit, Project Settings, here we will find this input manager, which has this axis, as you see, and there is different inputs which are available into this project, into this input manager. And it also has this horizontal and vertical inputs. That's exactly what we are looking for because if you open the horizontal, you see it already has some keys. So A and D, left and right. It means that if we access this horizontal input from our script, and if we get information about horizontal input from our script, when we click, for example, A and D or left and right, Unity will automatically know that we are referring to this axis and we want to have some left and right directions. Same goes for the vertical axis, and we can basically use both of them into our script. Okay, now let's go and actually start coding. And for that, we obviously will need to have some kind of C# script. For that and for the better organization, first of all, let's go in the assets folder on the empty space, right click, create folder, and let's call this one scripts. And we will save all of the scripts into the scripts folder. So let's open scripts folder, right click, create C# script, and let's call this one player movement. Just one rule to remember, it should not have any kind of space in the name of your script, otherwise you will get some errors. So type your name of your script without any kind of space. And well, it will be good if you start writing with the first capital letter. It's just a good practice. So just two rules. Start with the capital letter and you don't have any kind of space. Okay, let's open the script in the Visual Studio. And this is the default look. And we have two functions by default: void start, which is called when our game starts first, and void update, and it's called when every single frame basically. And before the start, you see we have some space now, and here we can create some variables. Now, if you don't know anything about variables are just like containers. We can store some information, store some data there, and then simply use them very easily into our actual code. And for that, we can, for example, create some variable, and we can say public float. And let's call this one move speed. So let's say we need to have some container to save our speed. And because we obviously will need to use some speed into our actual game for our player to basically move. Well, you see, this is just basic line how we can create some variables. And if you know nothing about variables, there are different types of variables. You see, we used floats. Floats are used when we are referring to numbers, and since our speed is number, that's why we are creating type of float. But there are other types of variables as well. So there are floats and integers, there are strings, doubles, and so on and so on. If you want to check all the variables, you can just Google C# variables and you will easily find them. But of course, I will explain you all the variables that we will create. So right now we have the variable for the move speed, and it's public. Well, when we make the variable public, it means that if we save the script, for example, let's save the script and let's go back, we will be able to see that variable into our Unity editor. So, to do that, first of all, we should assign this script into some game object into our scene. And since it's the player movement script, it will be logical to assign the script into our player, right? To assign script, we just need to take the script and drop it into our player. And if we select player now, if we scroll down, we should see this player movement script here. If you don't see the script, well, let me remove it for a moment. There is alternative way. You can select player and hit this add component. And in the search box, type name of your script, which is player movement. All right. Anyway, when we add the script, we see this move speed. Well, if it was the private variable, we will not be able to see move speed here. And that's the main difference, basically. And having move speed public, for example, will be better than private because, for example, we might change the move speed quite often if we don't like it when we play test our game. So it will be logical to be able to change our variable from the Unity editor directly. All right. Okay, let's continue. Well, next thing that we will need is to have reference to this character controller. And to do that, we can say private. This time we are using private, and let's call, well, private character controller, and let's call this one char controller, just like this. Basically, we can name it anything that we like, our containers, but try to be logical in order to have some easy understanding code. Well, we have the container of car char controller, but Unity does not know what we are referring with this word just yet. So what we should do, we should basically somehow get reference to this specific character controller. And to do that, there is one method, which is called getComponent method. And for example, we can go in the void start and say our char controller equals getComponent, and the component name that we are looking is obviously character controller, brackets, semicolon, and that's it. Now when we will use this car controller, Unity will check our player and will find this character controller because we are searching for the character controller, and it will know that we are referring to our character controller. All right. Also, as I said, we will need to access our inputs, our horizontal and vertical inputs, the ones that I showed you before. And we will need some variables, some containers for them as well. So let's create private float horizontal input and private float vertical input. Those will be our containers for our inputs. We will also need to have some vector free. Vector free is just a point which has free dimensions, free parameters, x, y, and z, and it will be for our player's direction. So let's create private, vector free, and let's call this one move direction. Just like this. All right, we have everything to start working. Now, in the update, first thing that we will do, we will get information about our horizontal and vertical input and store them into our variables, into our horizontal input and vertical input variable. And to do that, to get information about our horizontal input, for example, we just need to say input dot get axis raw, and in brackets and quotation marks, we should say horizontal. But be careful, everything is case sensitive here in quotation marks, so you should type it correctly, this horizontal, otherwise this method will not work. Well, we have access to our horizontal input, and as I said, we should also store this horizontal input into our variable of the horizontal input. Well, it's quite easy. In front of it, we just need to say horizontal input equals this. And that's it. Now we have information about horizontal input, and we are storing it into this variable. And we should do same for the vertical input. So we will say vertical input equals input, not index, input dot get axis raw, and in brackets and quotation marks, we can say vertical. That's it. We have the horizontal and vertical input. Let me skip few space. And well, as I said, we are able to move with the help of character controller. And I mentioned that it has the built-in function with the name of move. So for example, we can say char controller dot move. And well, this move, if we hover over to it, as we see, it needs to have some kind of vector free motion. That's exactly we created this direction of vector free. So it means that we can use this move direction here. So we can say move direction. Well, it's all nice, but the problem is that we don't know what is this move direction just yet, because right now it's just empty container. So we should say to Unity, what is this move direction at all? So we can say here simply move direction equals new vector free. Well, this is just how we are giving our game object some kind of direction. We are creating new vector free, so new points. And as I said, this vector free takes three values, three parameters, x, y, and z. And if you remember, as I said, we should, in order to move our player, we should change the position on the z and on the x. Well, y is for jumping, so we don't care about y just yet. So for the x and for the z for now. And for that, we can use these inputs, information about our inputs. So we can simply say horizontal inputs, and we can multiply it to some speed to have some speed. That's why we created some move speed variable, comma. That's for the x, our horizontal input. For the y, well, as I said, we don't care about y just yet, so we will say 0f. And after that, for the z, well, we will pass our vertical input and we will multiply it to some move speed. And that's pretty much it, how we can make our player move. We will have only one problem because right now our game object will just fly around like crazy, and to smooth our movement, what we can do, we can multiply this move direction to time dot delta time. This time dot delta time is time between frames, and it will help us to normalize our movement. And that's pretty much it, how you can easily move your players with the help of character controller. We just needed to know that it has the function of move, which takes one variable of move direction. And for the move direction, well, we just took information about our inputs and we multiplied it to some speed. So let's save our script and let's go back in Unity and let's check if everything is working. Well, first of all, let's select player, let's scroll down. It has this move speed. Let's make move speed to be 5, for example. And let's hit play. We can always change this move speed, by the way. Well, as you see, we are able to move. Our player is not on the ground just yet, but it's okay. Main point is that we are indeed able to move. And we can save this scene.